This is the sixth class in Perek Hakoines, which is a Maseches Bava Kama on Daf Nun Vav Amud Aleph. Let's begin with a general outline of this class. In the previous Gomorrah, we presented a brisa with 4 cases that a person is pater b'dinei adam and chayiv b'dinei shemayim. In the previous Gomorrah, we spoke about the first case in the brisa, and we asked, why is the individual pater b'dinei adam? He should be chayiv b'dinei adam. And the Gomorrah answered whatever it answered. In our Gomorrah, the Gomorrah already discussed one of the cases. Our Gomorrah will question what are the exact specifics in the other 3 cases. So in the first case, we asked it should be pater, it should be chayiv even b'dinei adam. We're going to ask the same thing about the second case, it should be chayiv b'dinei adam. We'll ask the same thing about the third case, that it should be chayiv b'dinei adam. And about the fourth case, we'll ask not that it should be chayiv b'dinei adam, but rather that it's obvious that it's chayiv b'dinei shemayim, and we'll explain why it's not. So let's see the Gomorrah now inside in the flowchart form. So we'll start off with the brisa, with the teaching from Rabbi Yeshua, that there are 4 cases that a person is pater b'dinei adam and chayiv b'dinei shemayim. And we already spoke about the first case. The Gomorrah now moves on to the second case. And the Gomorrah quotes the brisa, and it's in a purple arrow pointing downwards because the quote leads into a question. The brisa said, one who bends his fellow's grain in front of a fire. So the Gomorrah asks, hey chidami, how is this case? If we look at the case, it would seem that the person should be chayiv even b'dinei adam. If you'll say that the fire was then able to reach it with a normal wind as a result of bending over the grain, the fire then burnt the grain together with a normal wind blowing it, then he should also be chayiv b'dinei adam. Also b'dinei adam he should be chayiv, since as a result of his actions the grain was burnt. And he was supposed to anticipate a normal wind. That's something which is expected and something that a person has to anticipate. And the Gomorrah answers, rather it reached it with an out-of-the-ordinary wind. It wasn't an ordinary wind that led to the fire burning the grain, but rather when he bent the grain, suddenly an out-of-the-ordinary wind came and fueled the fire to be able to reach the grain as a result of him bending it over. And therefore, since it's an out-of-the-ordinary wind, which is not something a person is expected to anticipate, as a result, he's pater b'dinei adam, but nevertheless, since it was through his actions that the grain was burnt, he is chayiv b'dinei shemayim. So let's just see a scroll on that, which is not something the person that bent the grain is expected to anticipate, and therefore he's pater b'dinei adam. A second answer for why he's pater b'dinei adam is, it's an answer from Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said it's a case where he made it Tomman. The reason he's pater is because this is a case that the grain was Tomman, and like we explained in the introduction, when something is Tomman, something is covered, it's hidden, and a fire burns it, the person who lit the fire is not chayiv. So over here there is no chayiv for the item, the grain, since the grain was Tomman. And we'll see in a moment what this case looks like. It's a case that he placed the cloth over the grain when the fire approached it. By doing this, he caused that it's Tomman, and as a result, the owner of the grain doesn't get paid for his loss. So what happened was he saw the fire approaching, he covered the grain with a cloth, like Rashi says, Sheperes Allah Sadan, he placed the cloth over it. As a result now, the person who lit the fire is not chayiv to pay for the grain because the grain is Tomman. So there is no chiyuv over here, regardless of whether it's a regular wind or not. There is no chiyuv for Tomman. Nevertheless, since he caused that the owner of the grain should not be paid for his loss, he is chayiv b'dinei shemayim to compensate the owner of the grain. So those are 2 explanations for why the individual is pater b'dinei adam, either because it's an out-of-the-ordinary wind, or because it's a case that there's no chiyuv here since it's Tomman. Now we move on to the second case, and the Gomorrah quotes the brisa to lead into a question. The brisa said, one who hires false edim, he's chayiv b'dinei shemayim, and he's pater b'dinei adam and chayiv b'dinei shemayim. So the Gomorrah asks, hey chidami, how is this case? He should really be chayiv even b'dinei adam. If it's for himself, if he hired the edim to testify that person A owes him money, and as a result he made money off of this, if it's for himself, he should have to pay even b'dinei adam. He has to return the money that he received. Since he received money, he needs to return it. And the Gomorrah answers, rather, it's for his fellow. It's a case where an individual hired edim to testify that person A owes person B money, and person A paid person B the money as a result. And for whatever reason, person B is unable to pay back the money. So the din is, the one who hired the edim, although he's pater b'dinei adam, to pay for the loss that person A sustained. Nevertheless, he's chayev b'dinei shemayim to pay for that loss. And now we move on to the fourth and final case in the Brisa. So we quote the Brisa again. The Brisa said, one who knows Eidos and doesn't testify. So we have an individual, he says, I have information, but he doesn't bring it to Bezdin. So the Gemara asks, over here we're not asking that he should be chayev b'dinei adam. However, the question is, it's obvious that he is chayev b'dinei shemayim. There's no need to teach it to us. The Gemara says, hey chidami, how is this case? If it's two Eidim, if it's referring to a case that an individual withheld testimony that he has together with his fellow, and as a result that he didn't share the testimony, there's no Eidus anymore, or if both of them didn't share the testimony. If it's two Eidim, then it's obvious that they're chayev b'dinei shemayim, since it's min ha-Torah. It's min ha-Torah that the person did something wrong, as it says in the Torah, im lo yagid, if the Eidim do not share their testimony, v'nasa avayne, they're going to carry their sin. And since it's a chiyuv min ha-Torah, of course he's chayev b'dinei shemayim. So what's the reason the Brisa needs to teach this to us? So in the first three cases, the question was, why is the individual only chayev b'dinei shemayim? He should also be chayev b'dinei adam. In the last case, the question is, we understand that he's not chayev b'dinei adam, and that he is chayev only b'dinei shemayim, but it's obvious that he's chayev b'dinei shemayim. What's the reason it needs to be taught to us? And the Gemara answers, rather, it's when he's the only witness. It's referring to a case that a person has testimony that person A owes person B money and he doesn't share it with Bezdin. So why is he chayev b'dinei shemayim? He didn't cause any loss, since if there's only one witness is not able to make person A pay person B. So this is based on what we said in the introduction, and that is, and since if he testified, the person would be chayev a shvur, person A would have to swear that he doesn't owe the money, and he might decline to do so. He might say, I don't want to take a shvur, I don't want to swear, it's a very serious matter, and as a result he'd have to pay. Person A would end up having to pay since he declined to swear. That's why he's chayev b'dinei shemayim. Since it's possible that as a result of his testimony, person A might have ended up paying person B the money. Therefore, although he's pater b'dinei adam to pay for it, he's chayev b'dinei shemayim. And that's the chiddush, because that's not min ha-Torah. So those are the three questions the Gemara asks. So basically, to summarize, we asked the question in the previous class, in the first case, that it should be chayev b'dinei adam. We explained why it's not, because it was a weak wall. We asked in the second case, it should be chayev b'dinei adam, and we explained why it's not, either because it's a wind that's out of the ordinary, or because it was Tomman and there's no chiyuv over here. We asked on the third case, that if the person hired Eidim to benefit himself, then he should be chayev b'dinei adam. And we explained that it was for others. That's why it's only b'dinei shemayim. So the first three cases, we thought it should be chayev b'dinei adam, and we explained why it's only b'dinei shemayim. And in the fourth case, we asked that it's obvious that it's chayev b'dinei shemayim, and we explained why it's not obvious, since it's not a case of two witnesses that withheld testimony, but rather a case of one witness that withheld his testimony, and there was no other witness over there. And since it's only of one aid, therefore it's a chiddush. It is a teaching to tell us that the individual is chayev b'dinei shemayim.